Breaking news, Meghan Markle.
Jesus.
Yeah. Somehow Meghan was invited to Fortune's Most Powerful Women.
3 minutes ago, Westminster flipped into straight chaos. Phones were buzzing non-stop, staff tearing across the courtyards like something had exploded, and ministers were yanked out of their lunches and dragged into back rooms without warning. Whatever hit Parliament wasn't small. This was the kind of political shock that rattles a whole country in seconds. Word spread fast that the UK government had taken a move almost nobody believed was real. Parliament had decided to block Meghan Markle's brand new business empire, not delay it, not review it, block it outright, like a door slammed shut before anyone even touched the handle. Even the most seasoned political reporters froze for a second, stunned that this wasn't a minor complaint or another routine clarification. It was something way bigger. This was a full-on government intervention aimed at a private international brand built by a duchess living across the ocean, and inside the Palace of Westminster, a secret briefing started circulating like a hot coal passed hand to hand. It was meant for a tiny circle of high-ranking officials, but somehow it leaked. And once it did, the temperature inside that building spiked instantly. The document reportedly laid out Meghan's rising business machine, a global lifestyle empire branching into beauty, wellness, digital media, and celebrity partnerships, and coldly labelled it a commercial operation using royal association without enough oversight. It was sharp, icy, and clearly written by people who were nervous and trying hard not to show it. But minutes later came the real shocker. MPs rushed out a fast-tracked motion written in record time, the Royal Titles Commercial Protections Amendment, a law aimed at shielding royal titles and anything close to royal branding from commercial use, a move that, intentional or not, landed Meghan's entire empire right in the crosshairs, like a spotlight snapping on in a dark room. Inside the committee room, the tension was so thick it felt like the air itself was humming.
Launch her jams and her products via these new Netflix shops that are opening in kind of malls in America. It doesn't sound like, it's not exactly for...
One MP said Meghan's global influence had outgrown every regulatory framework in place. Another snapped back, saying Parliament was rushing into laws they barely understood. The whole room felt like a fuse burning towards something explosive. And honestly, the truth was simple. Meghan's business empire had grown too massive to ignore, projected billion-dollar valuations.
William and Catherine being very regal, doing the diplomatic thing. Then, overseas we had Meghan on another red carpet.
Hollywood partnerships stacking up, multiple product lines ready for worldwide launch, and a major brand event scheduled for next week. Parliament, whether motivated by caution, principles, or political pressure, was trying to slam the brakes before the train even left the station. Across London, journalists scrambled everywhere, trying to verify what was already blowing up in their inboxes and message threads. The government was stepping in to challenge a duchess's business before the public even knew what the full brand looked like. Meanwhile, in California, things stayed calm until Meghan's phone lit up like fireworks. First one alert, then more. Then her team got flooded with calls from reporters, lawyers, advisors, and executives demanding answers. Fast. The pace changed from calm to crisis in a blink. Nobody on Meghan's team expected this level of heat. Not the timing, not the force, and definitely not lawmakers drafting legislation that might shut her empire down before it fully launched. Some insiders said her team broke into emergency mode, while others claimed they'd always known the UK was preparing for this kind of collision since the day she stepped out of the royal structure. Either way, the situation jumped from a normal business challenge to a global political storm within minutes. Parliament wasn't just questioning her branding, they were proposing restrictions on using anything close to royal identity in business, including foreign companies tied to UK titles or anything that might be seen as royal symbolism. The wild part, Meghan didn't even operate in the UK. London was trying to regulate a company based in Montecito, and the irony wasn't lost on anyone. Political commentators jumped into the mess instantly, some saying Parliament had zero jurisdiction, others saying Meghan's influence stayed tied to her title no matter where she lived, and a few insisting MPs were reacting out of insecurity, scrambling to control something they never expected to grow this big. Social media blew up the moment the news hit. Hashtag Parliament versus Meghan, hashtag Sussex Empire, hashtag Letherbuild, hashtag Royal Blockade, hashtag Global Duchess, not just on TikTok or Twitter, Across continents, the digital world was on fire. American networks blasted the story. European analysts chimed in hour by hour. Australian broadcasters jumped into debates about whether Parliament's actions came from integrity or straight fear. Investors perked up fast. Hollywood producers on upcoming projects started worrying about fallout, and brand partners with signed contracts wondered if this controversy would be explosive, in a good way or a bad way. Because here's the twist. Parliament's attempt to restrict her empire actually made Meghan's brand even louder, even stronger, even more talked about. The government accidentally jump-started her global marketing campaign, but Meghan wasn't celebrating yet. She knew this was a risky game, and she understood better than anyone that even the idea of royal conflict could shake everything she was building. Behind closed doors in Westminster, MPs prepared for the next wave: legal fights, diplomatic tension, public outrage, and possibly backlash from American partners who felt this looked like political interference. The atmosphere was frantic, sharp, and unpredictable. A senior government insider reportedly said it felt like trying to cage a wildfire after it already jumped the valley. And the whole place knew things were slipping beyond their control. Meanwhile, Meghan's team stayed completely silent. Not a statement, not a quote, not even a hint on Instagram. Silence, but the strategic kind. Not surrender. Because while Parliament tried to control the story, Meghan was already working on her countermove, and when she made it, everything, politics, business, and the royal dynamic would shift again. This wasn't a simple business launch anymore. It was turning into a global standoff. A duchess on one side, a government on the other, billions hanging in the balance, and the entire world locked in to watch. And while Westminster tried to steady itself from the political quake it unleashed, another shockwave hit as American media framed Parliament's move as an attack on a US-based entrepreneur, with major outlets from New York to Los Angeles asking if the UK was trying to control a private American company simply because the woman running it happened to be a duchess. And legal analysts argued jurisdiction live on air, while business experts compared it to past international fights over intellectual property and branding. But for Meghan, the real concern wasn't the headlines. It was the whispers starting to swirl around the investors.
What it was she's trying to trademark the new name for her lifestyle brand, as ever. Remember, previously
A few major partners suddenly requested urgent clarification calls, the kind that usually signal growing nerves about legal risks that could spread fast if not handled right. Some feared costly delays, others worried about reputational shockwaves. A handful even suggested pressing pause on certain collaborations until the political storm calmed down. Behind closed doors, her team worked non-stop. Advisors drafted statements only to delete them moments later. Lawyers broke down every legal angle hidden inside Parliament's proposed amendment, searching for traps nobody saw coming. Strategists tried to predict how the royal institution might respond next, because one quiet truth sat in the background like a shadow no one wanted to name. If the palace publicly backed Parliament's move, Meghan's empire could take a hit big enough to leave a crater in its path. But inside Buckingham Palace, things were far more complicated than anyone expected. Senior courtiers faced their own turmoil. Some feared the monarchy would look petty if it seemed like they were blocking a former royal from building a business. Others argued that letting Meghan's empire grow unchecked could blur long-standing boundaries that protect the crown's identity. Whichever side won the internal tug-of-war would decide whether this situation escalated into a full-blown royal crisis. Meanwhile, back in the US, Meghan held what an insider described as the most decisive meeting of her post-royal life. There was no panic, no raised voices, only strategy. She walked into the room calm, composed, and razor-focused. She listened to every advisor, lawyer, and PR expert, then made a move no one saw coming. She chose not to fight the legislation directly. Instead, she planned to outmaneuver it. Her solution was bold and clean: expand the empire even faster into markets untouched by the amendment. That meant partnerships far outside the UK, digital platforms beyond anyone's legal reach, and a full-scale campaign that framed her brand as a global creation, not a royal extension. With one decision, she shifted the narrative from conflict to ambition, turning pressure into momentum. But the world wasn't done reacting. By that evening, social media had split into two massive camps. Some blasted Parliament for overreach, while others insisted the government had every right to protect royal symbols. Thousands of creators posted hour-by-hour breakdowns, feeding a digital wildfire that grew with every refresh. Commentators analysed the political motives. Even celebrities quietly joined the conversation, liking posts that hinted at deeper tensions beneath the surface. Then came something no one expected. An anonymous former MP stepped forward, revealing that not everyone in Westminster supported the amendment at all. According to the source, the proposal had been pushed through by a handful of influential members with strong personal views about protecting the crown. That revelation set off another media storm. Reporters demanded answers. Opposition parties slammed the rushed process. Analysts warned the UK might look like it was interfering with private enterprise. Inside Parliament, tensions spiked even higher. Some MPs argued they had bigger national issues to handle. Others feared the backlash made the government look reactive and unstable. And through all this chaos, Meghan stayed completely silent until the next morning. Then her team released a short, perfectly shaped statement. No anger, no defensiveness, just calm messaging with sharp precision. Our focus remains on building a global brand based on integrity, creativity, and community impact. We look forward to continuing our work with partners around the world. That was it. 12 steady words that hit harder than any long press event. Social media exploded again. Supporters praised her poise. Critics accused her of sidestepping. Business analysts called the statement a masterclass in strategic control. Even some MPs were annoyed because she refused to play the role they expected, the reactive, angry Duchess. Then, while Parliament was still debating the amendment, Meghan delivered the counterpunch. Her team announced a major new sector of her empire launching in South America, backed by investors with zero UK ties and zero interest in Westminster politics. It was a massive expansion, one Parliament had absolutely no power over. The timing was controlled, the message unmistakable. Meghan wasn't fighting the UK, she was outgrowing it. Inside Parliament, confidence shifted into unease. Some MPs realised they had underestimated her reach. Others worried their actions had unintentionally boosted her brand instead of limiting it. Several raised concerns that the amendment could spark diplomatic or trade friction with American partners if things escalated further. It became clear that this was no longer about titles. It was about influence, global influence, the kind that doesn't bow to borders, politics, or centuries-old tradition. Reporters began describing the moment as a collision between two worlds, the modern celebrity-driven global economy versus the symbolic authority of the British monarchy. But the final twist arrived hours later. A senior parliamentary advisor leaked a memo admitting that the legislation might need a revision for clarity, an indirect way of saying Parliament had acted too fast, too aggressively, and maybe without considering how unenforceable it could become. For Meghan, this was the quiet victory she wanted. Her empire stood strong, her influence only grew, and the UK's attempt to contain her had turned into the exact story that pushed her brand into an even bigger international spotlight. The conflict wasn't over. Parliament would keep debating the amendment in the coming weeks, but the balance of power had already shifted. Meghan now stood, not as a duchess asking permission from institutions overseas, but as a global business force they could no longer ignore. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and drop a comment to keep this story alive.